Welcome back once again. Here it is, a nice chilly day in North Carolina in 2021 in the month of January. And I have another small issue with my 99 Ford Ranger XLT, the long version. Now this is going to make a difference. This is the 126-inch wheelbase. There's the 112, the 118, and this is the 126. And I want to tell you there was a bit of an issue on this particular repair, which is going to be my fuel pump.
Life sensors indicate we have a problem.
It is the automatic transmission and that big V6 engine. As you can see in the foreground to the left, there is the fuel tank. In order to repair this, as a matter of fact, I'm replacing the entire fuel pump. There are several ways you can do it. I chose to go ahead and remove the fuel tank from underneath. As you can see, my truck is up on some ramps. It is a whole lot easier, on second thought, if I were to at least remove the camper shell and remove the truck bed. And it's not that difficult. There are quite a few videos on there about how to remove these T55 bolts, or 6 of them. Some people tilt the bed up, some people take the entire bed off. If you take the entire bed off, there's a couple of wiring connections that you may have to disconnect. But on second thought, I think I should have done that. It would have been easier to remove this entire thing, because when I did that, I also not only replaced the fuel pump, the entire mechanism, I replaced the fuel sensor, and I'm replacing the fuel lines. That was the big problem. You'll see in a minute. Now, please understand, I'm going to show you how I tested to see what was going wrong, and at the same time, you're playing with gasoline, not just gasoline, vapors.
Is this important?
Here's a hint for you geniuses out there.
So if you mess anything up, especially with trying to run the testing on this as far as the diagnostics, and or light yourself on fire.
Fire is inspirational. They should use it in the Olympics, because I did the 100-yard dash in 4.3.
Or something else.
Blow something up!
I take no responsibility. I'm letting you know that up front. You're dealing with gasoline. So how did I know that the fuel pump was having a problem? Well, I would do a key on, not a start, but a key on, and sometimes you'd hear the hum of the fuel pump, sometimes you wouldn't. And if you don't hear the hum of the fuel pump, it's not priming the system, and it was a crank, no start. And it was intermittent. It's the worst kind of problem, it's intermittent. Oh, and of course this thing started to fail when your fuel tank is empty. This fuel tank can hold anywhere from 15 to 20 gallons. And I had to siphon it. I'm going to show you a couple methodologies there. But, like I say, I kept testing it, and you would just, you'd get nothing for 5, 6, 7, 8 key-ons. And then you might get it. It wasn't temperature related. So I got a wiring diagram, and I'm going to show you how I traced my circuit. Now this wiring diagram may or may not fit your vehicle, so be careful. But let me show you how I tested and the circuit. So here's the internal fuse box. This 20 amp fuse, common point of failure, could blow. Over here, this is the relay for that particular fuel pump. Now, this then runs to the inertia switch inside. I'll show you that. It is mounted up on the passenger side firewall. That is a common failure item also. This is the inertia switch. Notice that it is depressed, and it sits up on the firewall just under the carpet, couple little screws, and out it comes. That's in case you ever have a collision, or if you have a rollover, that cuts the fuel pump off so you don't feed the fire. And I'll show you how I connected that. So then that runs to underneath the vehicle, and I made an assumption. Up under there, I tied in 2 of the lines, because what I did is eliminated the fuel pump. I figured it was the fuel pump. Now, was it the inertia switch? Was it the fuel pump? Was it the relay? Was it the fuse? Therein lies the $64,000 question. So what I did is I assumed I would check the circuit, check your powers and grounds. Let me put this back up on the stand. Let's get a little light on the subject. Now, you could use a meter like I have here, but that's a bit on the slow side. Again, I got the audible with my test light. So what I did is I did a T-pin in the back of the, in this case it's a pink wire with a black stripe, and grounded it here. So this will test the entire circuit, because again in the back it's disconnected from the fuel pump, and I connected the pink and black wire with one of the ground wires that then runs up here to the driver's side. Now this green and yellow is the feed that comes from the relay and the fuse. I just did a T-pin. So I grounded my light. So here's the connection to the light. It goes all the way to the little ground, and I happen to have a ground right there. And I connected it here. Now, I'm going to set it up on the tripod, and I'm going to turn the key and let you see and hear the audible. Now, again, I've got the ding, ding, ding business. I wish I had disconnected it a long time ago, but we'll see if I've got a good continuous circuit.
A few moments later.
All right, here we go. Now again, remember it's momentary. It only primes for a few seconds. Again, you can do it with the meter, but it's a little bit slower. I like this audible and the light. See, 100% every time. So that eliminated that pump. Alright, so here's one method to get your tank empty. Be careful with this. What you're going to do is you're going to make the pump run continuously until the tank's empty, then cut it off. Well, how do I do that? Aha! Has anybody noticed up to this point? I told you safety first. Make sure the negative terminal is off your battery. Once I tested, I took the negative terminal off. So, I took my relay out here, and you'll see these two connections. Once again, be careful. Read your wiring diagram. That relay will energize once I turn the ignition key. So what I want to do is a continuous. This is like a normally open type relay. So once you energize it, it becomes closed, and it energizes the entire circuit. So what I did, you could stick a couple of paper, bend a paper clip and put it in there. I don't like that method. I like using things that are fused. Now, you get these little outdoor weatherproof fuse holders at any of the auto parts stores. That's a 20 amp circuit, but I should get it in the camera there. I just happen to have a 15 amp fuse. I put a couple of spades on there, trimmed the plastic off because it was a weatherproof type, and I very delicately put it in and match the holes for these two larger spades, not the three, but the two. Since I am also changing the fuel filter, which you should do, I took that line and then ran it into some buckets. So what I would do is I would have this, I would put my negative cable onto the negative post of the battery and then make the pump run continuously. So I would fill up these buckets. I'll show you the buckets that I got. I'd fill up a bucket, say about 2 or 3 gallons, give a little break. Don't want to burn things up. Give it 2 or 3 minutes to cool off. Then, do it again, get a bucket filled up, because these are 5-gallon buckets. Again, I told you this tank can hold anywhere from 15 to 19 gallons, and of course it failed when it was full. I filled up the buckets. Or I grabbed one of those little siphons, those $4, $5 siphons that you can pump gas out of your car that you can get at Walmart. And they work okay, but you can't go down the fuel filler neck because it has an anti-siphoning strainer in there as well as the fuel filler hose. So I had to disconnect from the actual fuel filler neck and run a hose down there and pump it a couple times to get it to drain in the buckets. You can do it either way. I did this both methodologies, but I started with the siphoning gizmo first. Then I went to this because it was much faster. Bought these 5-gallon buckets at Walmart for about $3 a piece and got the lids. You can also get the same thing at Home Depot and Lowe's. Just make sure you get the lids, but the lids are generally not with the buckets. You have to go back to the paint section to find the lids. So I filled 4 of these up and had a little bit more in another. I had very little in this tank. Very, very little as far as debris. Okay, so how did I get this tank underneath my truck? Out of there. Well, it wasn't pleasant. There are 2 straps that are holding it up underneath. And I'll show you one. Hold on. Let's see if we can see this. This is one of the straps. Now, it's bolted here, and that's on the passenger side. Then it has like a T that fits into the frame on the other side. There are 2 of these. I PB blasted these bolts, waited a day, and slowly took those out. But remember, you have gas, there's still 2 or 3 gallons of gasoline in there, and it sloshes around. If you don't know, 1 gallon of water is 8 pounds. 1 gallon of gasoline is 6 pounds. So before I pumped this out, there was an extra 100 pounds of fuel in there, which makes it very difficult. So luckily what I did is I had a cooler and a toolbox, and I was able to lower it down to a certain point. Then literally I was reaching back from underneath this way and up and over, and used a mirror to disconnect the fuel lines. And that's that standard fuel line that Ford has, and you have to use a special disconnect tool, and I'll show you that. And you see there's a bit of a bead right there around it, and that's what the hose clamps onto. But you got to have the removal tool in order to get this off. And there are different types. I have a scissors type. There's this type. There's some like this with a 45-degree angle. And there's the plastic type. And I have different sizes. So you match the diameter of the tubing. And it just so happens that I believe that was the one. Yep, here I'm dripping gas everywhere. You find the one that matches the diameter most closely. Nope, too big or too large. Let's do this one here. Still too large. So it ended up being this one here. And you clamp it on, and then you have to push the tubing in and then wedge this in there. And what it does is it releases some prongs. Some are plastic, some are metal, some are plastic and metal. And then you pop it off. Now, of course, it always looks easy on the video, but you have to push at the same time. You really need a second set of hands, and when you're on your head like I was, it's very difficult. And so then that pops off. It also has a safety clip on it. You'll see that. That keeps things from popping off when you're going down the road. So the safety clip is easy to figure out. Pop it off, then you put this in. Oh, I shoot a little WD-40 or silicone in there too to make it easier, because some of that stuff's been on there for a long time. And push that in and pull it off. Snapper back on, snap the safety clip back on, and you're done. Now, one other thing I'm going to do too is, you know, again, because of the lines being open for about a week or so, I've been fighting the bad weather, the cold and the wet, I'm going to add at least 1 bottle of heat, H-E-E-T. And I'll look at the directions. I think it's maybe 1 pint or so for every 15 gallons or whatever. I'm not sure on that. I have to double check, but I will, you know, fill up the tank. I'll add the heat, and that'll take care of any moisture in the line. It's great if this is up on a high lift, and you could reach up and see into it, but I'm on my back. Now you know why I say it probably would have been a better idea to go ahead and move the bed back. But getting the disconnect apart was the most difficult part. Then I just lowered it down onto a toolbox and a cooler, and it just so happens that front end is up on a frame, so you can slide it back and forth. Well, I still had a little bit of a problem, and I didn't see this. If you look up here, there's a hose connection for the evap system. What that does is that goes back to the charcoal canister. Now, luckily, it's hard to see, and I had to get the mirror, but that little connector was a press connector. You could take your fingers and pinch and pop it off. And then I had to work on taking these hoses that were over here and tilt the tank over a little bit. So again, when it's a one-man show, it can be a little bit difficult. And there were, like I say, 2 or 3 gallons of fuel left. And what I did is then I let this vent. You could smell it at my neighbor's house. I let this vent. I poured that fuel into another bucket so I didn't contaminate the good fuel. And then I let it air out overnight. And then I went in and I took a lint-free paper towel, you know, kind of like the shop towels, those paper towels, the blue ones, and wiped it out and took compressed air. So it's been drying for 4 or 5 days now. I've been working against the weather. But that's basically how I got it out. Like I say, one-man show, it's kind of tough. But now, what I'm going to do, unfortunately I've got rain coming for tomorrow. I'm going to have to give up the Ghost today. I'm going to leave this here and start putting in the pump sometime this week. Hopefully it'll get a little bit warmer. Man, it's cold. It's about, 43 degrees out here. So let me stop right here and we'll come back. So I've already taken the old fuel pump out, but how exactly did I get it out? Well, again, several different methodologies, and this is where you've got to be careful. You don't want sparks. You could take a screwdriver, since this is a plastic ring, you could take a screwdriver and a hammer and tap in these areas, and it's on pretty firmly, tap in these areas to take this off. Just be careful, it is plastic, so find the area that's thickest. Now, if this were a tank that had a steel cap or a steel ring, you'd have to use a brass punch. Why? Because brass doesn't spark. But it just so happens I had this nifty little gizmo. My daughter's boyfriend, I had to help him do a fuel pump in his car, and he bought one of these, I don't know, 15 bucks or something at the local auto parts store. It is adjustable, and it's a 1/2-inch drive. And I adjusted it to fit just firmly enough, right on top there. And I put a 1/2-inch drive in there and just slowly unscrewed it. It's firm, but that works quite nicely because it's adjustable. So actually, that was in trade for helping him change that fuel pump out. He gave me that, so I figured that's a pretty even trade. And who would have known I get to use it again? Some of the auto parts places might even have it as a loaner tool, but I like because it's adjustable because there are so many different variations on a theme. Here is the original fuel pump. Now look at that strainer. That is nasty. And again, it's been in there for a number of years, 20-something years. Now at the same time, I don't know if I mentioned this, I am also replacing the fuel sensor, which goes in here, and that was about 70 bucks. Because it'd be my luck, I'd get up under there, put it all together, and it wouldn't work. So I'm doing clamps, hoses, the entire unit here. There's a seal that comes with the unit, and I'm using, this is a Motorcraft. If you even get on Rock Auto, the Motorcraft version for this vehicle is like $453. At this age on a truck, so I went Delphi. So I'm going to be using a Delphi. So on the left is the original, and you can see the strainer is in pretty bad shape. Here's the Delphi on the right. I also, if you look here, I have to put the new pressure sensor in. There's where the old one was, and I'm not going to reuse that. So I have to take these tags off, and I'll go ahead and put a new pressure sensor in. So there is the new sensor. It is an NTK. Now, if you're familiar with the Japanese company NGK, these are pretty much the same guys. They just make this particular part. And it's just a quarter turn kind of thing to the left, take it out, and a quarter turn to the right to put it in. Alright, so let's talk about these parts. This was the worst part of the job, is trying to find a replacement hose. I figured I'm not going to put that back on. That thing is deteriorated over 20 years. And to find a replacement is extremely difficult. Again, that's the 126-inch wheelbase. And this particular hose you can find for the models before and after as long as it's the 112 and 118-inch wheelbase. It just so happens this is about 4 inches longer than the other replacement hoses. Now, there were some other considerations I had. Might make a sleeve, make my own spring, take some 14-gauge wire and wrap it tightly, and then make my own 90, but I did find this on filler neck Ford.com. I'll write that in there for you. It's a company in Spokane. It just so happens I can trim it down. From this corner, it's 14 inches each way. So I can trim off here and I can trim off this length. And I always use fuel hose, being nitrile. I don't use anything else. It'll deteriorate. I try not to use radiator hoses and coolant hoses if at all possible. So this was a 1.5 inch in diameter. Then there's the vent hose. I was able to find this. It's nitrile. I was able to find this at my local O'Reilly's Auto Parts. Now I got, obviously I buy it by the foot. I bought 3 feet so that I could experiment a little bit, because you know there's a bead that these things have to go over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat them up with a heat gun. I'm going to use some Dawn dishwashing liquid, smear it on the inside, smear it on the actual bead, and slide it on, and then tighten up. New clamps, of course, too. But you see, this thing is deteriorated. And this was extremely difficult to find. It's a 3/4 inch inside diameter. It was a pistol. I want to say this was $14, but it cost about $14 to ship it. This was $14 for about 3 feet. Now, I will give you the part numbers. I'll list the part numbers in there so you know which ones I'm talking about. So I'm back, and I'm trying to put the fuel pump in now. I've got a little bit of daylight left, and the temperature's about 55. We're supposed to get snow tonight, with a 100% chance, although it won't stick, but it's still going to be a mess. So here's my fuel tank. It's all cleaned out. Now, some people recommend once you air this thing out and get the vapors out of it, that you can wash it with warm soapy water. I didn't. I just went ahead and used some of those paper shop towels that are lint free. Wipe this all out. Made sure there's no debris in there. And we're going to go ahead and put the new fuel pump in. But let me show you. Let me get it off the tripod here. You've got to put it in a certain way, because there are 2 notches on this fuel pump. Excuse me while I turn that. There's a couple of notches. There's a small one and a large one, so make sure you get the orientation correct. Also, don't forget your rubber gasket. I will put these hoses on a little bit later, just before I get ready to put it into the truck, because I'm going to take them in the house, get them up to room temperature, you know, 70, 71. Then maybe take a heat gun, expand the ends a little bit so I can get it over the lip here, you know, this bead on each side. I do have them cut to the proper size. Alright, so I have put the washer on there. I want you to know it's a rubber washer. I sprayed some silicone in my hand and kind of lubed it up. It is a square cut washer, if you can see that. It's a square cut washer. Put it in the appropriate slot, and now we're going to put the actual fuel pump in. So let me back the camera up a little bit, and I'll be right back. So let's place this pump. And again, remember, there is a large opening here, small opening there. Everything's in place. Let's see, the large one is on this side. Very carefully place this in here. Don't bend anything. Don't break anything. Place it in the appropriate slot. Takes a little jiggling. It is there. Take my ring very carefully. Make sure that it's threaded on properly. Double check. Sometimes it can be a little finicky. You'll feel it. Tighten it up. Hand. Don't have to manhandle it. Don't have to be a gorilla about it. Okay. So give me a second, I'm going to go get my device and tighten it up a little bit more. I had to bring everything inside because it's so doggone cold. And as you can see, We had a snow the other day. So I brought the tank in, and what I wanted to do was put the fuel filler hose and the vent hose on. So, out in the cold it makes it very difficult, so I brought it in, heated things up to room temp. But then I took my heat gun and, I don't know, moderate heat I guess, heated up the ends that needed to go onto the plastic, and I reiterate, plastic connections, and then I took a little bit of Dawn dishwashing solution, heated them up, spread a little bit of that solution on, and was able to slide them right on. It made them very pliable. Now again, there are no gas fumes at this point because I had taken this outside, emptied it, cleaned it, dried it, compressed air, so I'm not having to worry about any kind of a fume or smell. Now, do not tell my wife I did this. She is currently at work, and I trust that my audience will not say anything. Okay, so I'm losing daylight, and it's cold out here. It's about 40, and I'm about ready to put the tank back in. So, a little silicone spray, or WD-40, that's where the evap is, so that's going to go toward the back. Here are my hoses with the clamps. And then my connections here for the hoses, fuel hoses, I put more silicone there, so it's easy to get those things on and off. I put a little dielectric grease on the inside of this and on this outside so that it's easier to slide plugs on and off at a later date. You see how long this thing is. Got to manhandle it up on there. Alright, so I'm going to give it a shot. Before I say that, let's show you what it looks like underneath. We're under the vehicle here, and we're looking toward the rear. This is the driver's side. You see the yellow? That's the disconnect for the evap. Now let me back it out a little bit, and I sprayed a little bit of silicone spray there. That's why it looks wet. And backing up, here are the two fuel hoses. There's one there, and one there, and that's where I sprayed some more silicone. And then it's going to go up in this area, and then as I move forward, it's kind of hard to see, but as I move forward I got to put the fuel hoses because they'll go to the fuel filler neck. But that's the back of the vehicle. Tight squeeze. And then remember the front, you have to lift it up over this one particular beam here. Once you get up under there and kind of get that tank in place, there are a couple of things you don't want to forget. On that one larger fuel line, it snaps on, but you have to place this clip, insert it so that that line doesn't back out. The other one has a metal clip, much like the metal clips on the fuel filter. Mine was so old it had broken, but the pump comes with a couple of different clips, so I've got to remember to put this clip back in there so that line doesn't pop off. Let's see, let's crank it up and let's see how this bad boy sounds. She lives to drive another day. Cranks right up, 100%. I'm going to charge the battery overnight because I hadn't driven it in several weeks. Well, at least 3 weeks, so the battery ran down a little bit. So, I'm hoping this helps you. Hold on. Noisy neighbor. The pipes. Okay, back to what I was saying. I hope this helps. And jeez Louise. Okay, before we were so rudely interrupted, again, I hope this helps everyone. Doing it by yourself is probably an 8 out of 10. It is a dirty job. Trust me, when you remove that tank from underneath, it's dirty, it's nasty, and then you've got gasoline to deal with. So always be careful. The fumes and the vapors are more dangerous than the gas itself. So I'll leave you with my mantra. I'll fix your car, but it won't go far. Have a good one. Stay safe in the middle of COVID. Had I not been able to find the hoses that I did, especially that fuel hose with that 90-degree turn in it, I had a couple of ideas. I did not use these. I was able to find one that was longer and trim it down. But let's say you had to make your own 90-degree turn. So I could take, it was 1.5 inch inner diameter. So what I could do is, in order to keep this in place like this, one of the best things you could do is go to Lowe's and Home Depot and go in the back there where they have all the strong tie. That's the company name, Strong Tie. But they have these 98-cent ties that are probably about this long. They're thin. They have just enough strength to bend and stay in place without having to just, gorilla everything. So I figured, put it there, bend it, and then wrap it with wire. Now this is belt wire, but just to give you indication. Wrap it with wire. The wire also helps keep this tube from pinching, because when you bend, it's going to want to compress. And put that in there. Now, I would recommend, had I not been able to find what I did find, I would have tried 14 gauge electrical wire. It's fairly stiff. Of course, bell wire is not stiff enough. I think I measured out, based on the diameter of the tubing and this, that, and the other, probably about 4 feet would have given me this much distance. And just wrap it around there tightly. And so then when you bend this tube, hopefully it won't crimp. So that was one idea. Well, now, that may be difficult. You may need a little space underneath each of the loops. I even thought about this. This is a 2-inch PVC, electrical PVC, running it in here, heating that tube up, and running it in here and see if it'll mold to that shape. But I think it'll still pinch. But there's a possibility. Or do that and then go back, put that piece of metal in, and do the looping. One other thing I thought of. So let's say I had to splice it together. What could I use? Well, it just so happens, what you see here is, if you've ever done any galvanized fencing, this is for the top rail if you have to piece two together. You put one in here, one in there. But it just so happens it's small enough in diameter, it's small enough in thickness that it will fit inside. And you could put a clamp on it. Now what it doesn't have is the lip around here that the other tubings have, that the truck comes with, but that's okay. Now I would probably cut some of this down, and they say don't use galvanized pipe with gasoline. Well, that's okay. Soak this, immerse it in vinegar for at least a couple of days. You could use muriatic acid, but white vinegar is even better. And it'll take the galvanization off this. Zinc does not stand up well to acid. And so then you would have just plain steel. So you could actually piece it together. If you could find a piece that was already at a 90-degree angle, for example, the one that I told you about on the other models is just too short, you get one of those and a piece of this, couple of clamps, and off you go. But isn't that the perfect fit? One other thing you could do is get another filler neck, cut a piece off, and put it inside. But those filler necks are not inexpensive. This was a few bucks. Number 12 gauge wire, electrical wire, might do it, but boy, let me tell you, it's thick and it's difficult to bend, but it might work better than the 14. Again, I didn't use the experimentation method. I just went ahead and did what I did, was able to find that piece of hose that I needed. So there's a couple ideas just in case you run into the same situation.